get started with tonight's matchup. Dolphins at Buffalo Bills. Tua Tagovailoa and the Dolphins have a tall task ahead of them as they head to Buffalo to take on Josh Allen and the 2-0 Bills, including playoff Miami has lost each of their last 9 games in Buffalo, tied for the second longest losing streak in franchise history. Not to mention in the last 2 weeks, Miami stunk so bad, they're already having player-only meetings. Sort of mentioned that. RC, is McDaniels' job on the line tonight?
Are people going to still be standing outside of stores trying to get Jordans until he died? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, Mike McDaniels is in a situation to where this team is not only not performing well, but the thing that he actually allowed them to do well when he became the head coach, they no longer do. They no longer stretch the field. They no longer make dynamic plays. And I know what people are going to say, well, what about last week versus the New England Patriots? Jalen Waddle had some big plays. We watched Tyreek Hill catch a punt for 48 yards. We saw Devon Achane make a play where he just steps out of bounds right before he scores the touchdown. But the Miami Dolphins are regressing. The Miami Dolphins were a team that we thought were on the ascend. The Miami Dolphins got to the playoffs and couldn't perform because it was too damn cold in Kansas City. And ever since then, we've watched this team decline. And so to me, you look at the next 2 games, you have the Jets and you have the Panthers. You can now put an interim head coach in a position to help this team win in those next 2 games before you have a tough game in the third one. So I think tonight is all important to Mike McDaniels.
It's a results-based business, right? I mean, you'd be sitting at 0-3. You would have 4 straight losses. They're giving up in the last month like 35 points a game. Talk about Tyreek finally catching that 30-plus yard pass. That was the first time in a year. So to RC's point, it's kind of what he was brought to do there. Tua played better in week 2, but maybe not exactly the way that we would want Tua to play, like we saw him play in that first year or 2. And so you're trying to find the silver lining because, like, staring at 0-3 and the reality of the playoffs and what the future could be like, it's just how this business works. So it feels must win for Miami going up against a team that's as good as anybody in football and the Buffalo Bills. You got to go win the football game. I don't know the last time the Dolphins beat a team with a winning record. And some of it is you wanted to see the offense evolve. We've all, for about 2 years now talked about, Tua in the pass game, it's awesome timing. Can we get physical and run the football? Haven't really done that. So it's a results-based business. It's a tall task. The vibes haven't been great. They played better. It feels like must win.
Do y'all know that the Miami Dolphins are the only team since 2000 to allow points on the first 10 opponents' possessions to start a season?
Yeah.
I mean, nobody's done that in 25 years. But the Miami Dolphins have. And then I think about how this team can't play in inclement weather. And listen, y'all play football. I didn't. Here's my deal. How are you an NFL team and everybody knows you don't have a chance if the temperature is 40 degrees or lower? I mean, think about that for a second here. So to me, when I look at McDaniels, we were calling him a boy genius where he came into Miami, he got them the 2 wild card playoff berths or whatever. What has happened over the last 2 years to Miami in y'all estimation under Mike McDaniels?
Well, I think the first thing is the quarterback has regressed. The quarterback has had injuries that does affect the way that you could perform on the football field. Now, you've also had situations where your leaders don't know how to conduct themselves as leaders, whether that's away from the building or within the building. There are people who don't or who can't have a voice on how you're supposed to work, how you're supposed to show up, what sort of discipline you're supposed to have as a player and as a man. And there's also not a strong voice at the top. I love Mike McDaniels. I love talking to him. I think he's extremely intelligent. I think he understands the game of football. But what's happened to this locker room is this locker room has gotten away from him. His leaders rather talk about things publicly than talk about things privately. His leaders aren't going to him and say, hey, Mike, can we sit in a meeting together so we can get straight what we have to do to win?
How does a coach lose the locker room, lose the players in terms of having a kind of effect on them where they're conducting themselves appropriately and professionally? How does that happen?
I don't know if he's lost the locker room.
Okay.
We don't know that because sometimes wins and losses aren't necessarily attached to that. I will say this to answer your question, like, name me the guys in Miami that you know. Give me the names of the players of the guys that you know.
Tyreek Hill, Waddle, now if Minka Fitzpatrick, he's back. Those are the guys I know.
It's not a roster that feels that there's this tremendous amount of talent. If I asked you to do that with the Chargers and or the Ravens, you would rattle off 7, 8, 9 names. So I think there's a little bit like, how does it happen to go from a team 2 years ago that was the #1 seed in early December to where they are now is some of the talent hasn't developed. The rush guys like a Bradley Chubb and a Jalen Phillips, the injuries pulled them back, and so they got to get healthy. And then how does the coach lose the locker room? RC knows this. Winning covers everything in the NFL. It just does. There's that saying, winning cures all. It doesn't. It just covers everything. And they just haven't won as consistently as they've needed to. And then also players know, like, they know Baltimore knows that Baltimore can go play in any type of environment. The Bills know that they can play in any type of environment. The Chiefs know that at least the Chiefs of old play in any environment. I think the players in Miami know who they are as well. I think that they know that they can go chuck and duck.
Yeah, but the other thing is this, though. You put your team together to play in any environment. With everything that was going on with Josh Allen, all the things that we said about his mechanics coming out of college, with all the things that he had to work on from an accuracy standpoint, what they knew was he could go play physically in Buffalo.
Totally.
When you draft Tua Tagovailoa, there's only certain things that he can do.
Right.
When the question is, or when the statement is always, his superpower is accuracy. His superpower is anticipation. None of those things have to do with the physical, which makes it difficult to play in inclement weather.
Which is why I think your GM is in trouble, because ultimately it's going to come back to why was Tua picked instead of Justin Herbert when you knew physically he may have some limitations. For example, how you going to look in inclement weather, being undersized, being able to take hits, those kind of things. Anyway, moving on, we got to continue speaking about Tua. Earlier this week, Tua gave many praises to the very quarterback he's facing tonight. Listen to this, y'all.
He's top tier. If it's not with his arm, it's with his legs. That dude can do literally anything he wants. So definitely different skill set for me. I can't do half of what he does when it comes to running the ball and any of that. And then with how he can just chuck a ball down the field, with how far and the arm strength that he has, he's supreme when it comes to that.
RC, how would you feel if you were in the Dolphins locker room and you heard your quarterback talking about the opposing quarterback like that?
I'd say, duh. The best awareness is self-awareness. Tua ain't lying.
Yeah.
Tua can't do half the things that Josh Allen can do. But guess what? Most of the quarterbacks in the NFL can't do half the things that Josh Allen can do. What he's not doing is whistling past the graveyard. And so if you're Tua Tagovailoa, it's not about how much can I praise Josh Allen. It's how do I find a way to go out and beat Josh Allen? How do I come in the locker room and say, okay, he can do all of these things. Here are the things that I can do to help my offense compete with Josh Allen. It's not about what you say in the media. If Tua went out and said he can do as much as Josh Allen can do, we'd be looking at Tua like we were looking at Tyreek Hill when he said that Tua was the most accurate passer he's ever played with, or the best passer he'd ever played with. We say, okay, Tyreek, you just talking. So for Tua Tagovailoa, it's not about the words, it's about the actions.
Yeah, I mean, duh.
Yeah.
I mean, Tua knows that. We can all see that. The only people on the planet that can do what Josh does, I would tell you, are Lamar Jackson, probably Patrick Mahomes, and then maybe Justin Herbert. I would tell you to the top of my head, the guys that can play to that style and dominate in that way and take over a football game in that way, both with their arm and situationally with their legs, there's 3 or 4 of them. And so Tua's not in a group that makes him.
Is that your way of saying that Josh Allen is cemented as the best quarterback in the National Football League?
I'm not going to sit here and tell people and be disrespectful to Patrick Mahomes and what Patrick Mahomes has accomplished. Okay, I'm not going to do that. He's in a class of his own because of what he has accomplished. That being said, he's not playing to that level, and he's not being given the opportunity to play to that level this year. There's a group of 4. We all know it. There's the group of 4. It's Josh, it's Lamar, it's Patrick, it's Joe. Joe is hurt. I think the only guy that gets himself into that conversation this year potentially is Justin Herbert. And so if you want to tell me that Josh is playing as good as anybody, I agree. If you want to tell me he's the best quarterback in football, have at it. But you're not going to leave Lamar Jackson out there. Like, are you really going to get into an argument and say, Josh Allen's better than Lamar Jackson?
No.
Okay? Are we really going to pound the table over that? Absolutely not.
No, listen, the reason we look at Josh Allen winning the MVP in a year in which he wasn't even first team All-Pro is because we felt like Josh Allen did more with less. Josh Allen got a Buffalo Bills roster, especially offensively, that wasn't as good as the Baltimore Ravens roster. He got them to a position in the playoffs where they would have a chance to be in the AFC Championship, where he could put up numbers that showed you, okay, even with people around me who aren't the top tier of a skill set, I can be productive. Well, in the same sense, for the last 3 years, we've been saying Patrick Mahomes doesn't have the requisite people to be a star quarterback. We've been saying Patrick Mahomes doesn't have a roster around him offensively that screams Super Bowl. Yet all he's done in the last 3 years was win 2 Super Bowls and go to another. All he's done in those last 3 years is go into Josh Allen's house and get a win. Go into Lamar Jackson's house and get a win. Here's what's happened. When Patrick Mahomes started playing, he was closer to his ceiling than anybody else in the NFL. From the first time we saw him, he was the best player that we had seen that year. And then the next year, he wins the MVP. Then the next year, he wins the Super Bowl and wins the Super Bowl MVP. So what's happened is Josh Allen has ascended. Lamar Jackson has ascended. Joe Burrow, all of these people. And they've closed that gap. Are they standing on the same tier? Absolutely. But until one of them goes and beats Patrick Mahomes when it matters, Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the world.
You can't keep losing to Patrick Mahomes. That's the only thing. Go ahead real quick, Dan. 20 seconds.
There's one quarterback that you can put right now, in the conversation with Josh Allen. Right now, and it's Lamar Jackson.
Mm-hmm. Very quick answer. I'm very proud of you. I didn't think you were capable of doing that. Way to go. And by the way, with you, just a little tidbit here, on First Take especially. You know, the camera follows you. You don't have to turn to look to it. It follows you. You don't follow the camera.
When my red light, comes on.
Maybe the red conflicted with the outfit. You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm saying.
Moderator, host. Moderator/host. Your job is to host the show. You coach me in the commercial.
You're telling me my job?
You coach me in the commercial.
That's what you're telling me? You broke one of the rules. That's being disrespectful. Let's move on, y'all, to the Chiefs, okay? The Chiefs look to avoid an 0-3 start as they head to MetLife Stadium to take on Russell Wilson and the Giants. Through weeks 1 and 2, the Chiefs ranked 26th in third down conversion percentage around the league, and the run game has been non-existent. With Reid Rice and Xavier Worthy sidelined, the passing game hasn't been efficient either. Travis, as in Travis Kelce, what's going on, bro?
Right now, we're just not executing to the degree that we hold ourselves accountable to, and that's just it starts up top with Coach Reid and how he holds us accountable, and then us players got to hold each other accountable. I got to be there for my guys, man, knowing that they put a lot on my plate to be a good player for this team, and I need to answer that bell, man.
Yeah, we'll go to you first. How confident are you that Kansas City can fix their offensive issues?
Not confident at all.
Not confident?
Not unless scheme becomes a altered thing, a changed thing. Okay. What would give me confidence? Patrick? That's it. That's the only thing right now that they're doing well. I would argue that Travis has actually played pretty well. I know everyone's like, oh my gosh, they're dropping the end zone, blah, blah, blah. I think Travis has done good things. Other than that, the offensive line is poor. So, is that just going to get fixed? No. The receivers aren't getting open. I know the receivers that are going to get healthy or back from suspension are going to be different, but when does that actually happen? And that necessarily wasn't a dominant thing when it was going on. The tight ends can't block in the run game. The backs are struggling with their vision. They're losing at the point of attack. Patrick leads the team in rushing. Patrick leads the NFL in quarterbacks running. Patrick had 88% of their offense against the Chargers and 81% of their offense against the Eagles. So it's like he's the only one doing something. So at some point, there's going to have to be something that happens in this offense or someone that makes me go, all right, I see it. I can see that evolution being a trademark pillar of their offense. Through 2 weeks, I have not.
I just think it's a matter of guys getting back healthy. I mean, Xavier Worthy and Reid Rice, I think once they're back, a lot of that gets fixed. I'm looking at Kareem Hunt and Pacheco averaging only 3.3 yards a carry.
So you think that's going to change with?
But I think that when you have threats, to throw the football to, and that opens things up, and that could also free up your running game a little bit. That's just my thing.
Well, I think there does need to be a change in philosophy as this team is constructed right now. But part of this team's construction is Xavier Worthy being injured. Part of this team's construction is Reid Rice being suspended. And I think when those things do happen, when they do get back on the field, this becomes a different team. But to Dan's point, Matt Nagy and Andy Reid, two of the smartest coaches doing their particular jobs have to figure out a way to take some of this off of Patrick's shoulders. Now, when you watch the film, which I know Dan does and I do, you say, okay, Patrick, if you hit Tyquan Thornton down the sideline against the Chargers early in that game, that's a big play. That's a touchdown.
Sure.
Right? If you can hit him on a post corner late in the game against the Philadelphia Eagles, then that's a touchdown. And so there have been some plays that I feel like Patrick Mahomes himself, who I am not saying by any means needs to do more than what he's doing, has missed, right? He hasn't been up to the standard. And so for me, there are pieces there. And when you add those other people, that's the thing that gives me confidence it could get fixed, Dan. I'm not saying that there aren't these glaring deficiencies in the Kansas City's Chiefs, especially compared to what they used to be, but there's an ability to fix it.
Asking both of y'all this question. How much, in terms of your trepidation about Kansas City, how much does last year factor into question? I'm not talking about the Super Bowl. I'm talking about all those one-possession victories that they had. What about those?
Very much so. It's very much so in my mind because, and it's not necessarily like the one possession victories, it's just stylistically how it looked. Just from like the deep football conversation, there's things that the offenses in football are doing well right now that are common. And then there's things that the offenses that are struggling in the NFL right now are doing that are common. And the Chiefs right now offensively fall on the ones that are struggling. I still think there's too much gun. I still don't believe that there's enough under center play action passes. And so I still don't believe that they play with enough tight ends that are in the run game. And so like that absolutely factors in. And that's why everyone who continues, and I'm trying to be respectful here, that to say like once Rasheed and Holly or Xavier Worthy are back, it's going to make a difference. Rasheed was a possession guy last year. He was get him the ball and do yards after the catch. So will that help? Yes. But is that really jumping to what the Chargers are wanting to do on offense or what the Bills can do on offense or what the Ravens can do on offense? God bless, no. And then Xavier Worthy, he averaged 10 yards a catch last year. It wasn't like he was going for 18 a catch and, oh, my gosh, now we're expanding a defense. And so while he was a good player last year and hopefully taking a step forward, you're not fixing an offense that has deficiencies on your offensive line. I don't care if you bring Randy Moss. In the NFL, if you have an offensive line that is struggling both to block people in the run and the pass game, you're not fixing it with perimeter players. That's not how football works.
Right.
I agree with that to a point, right? Because there's also something that has to do with winning. Right? Rasheed Rice was able to win. And if you think about who he was down the stretch of his rookie season, he became that guy. He became the bunch guy, get him the low crosser, right? He became the dig guy on condensed splits, zombie routes where you're running the post behind him. And now you add Xavier Worthy to that. Now you have Xavier Worthy, you have Hollywood Brown, and you have Rasheed Rice. Okay. There's a different sort of defense you have to play. We watched the pressure of the Philadelphia Eagles amp up and amp up and amp up as the game went along because they realized there was no one who could win out there.
Sure.
Right? We saw the safeties draw closer to the line. And so in my mind, it's this. And there is trepidation for this reason. It's hard to deconstruct while within success.
Sure.
It's hard to say while we're continuing to win, while we're continuing to find ourselves in Super Bowls, let's pull back from being inside of it and pick apart how to be better.
What do y'all make of the fact that, right, I'm assuming that based on everything y'all saying, that explains why Patrick Mahomes is scrambling twice as much now thus far than he did last season. Yeah. I'm talking about in terms of the rate of the scrambles. It's more than twice the amount of times he averaged last year. Is this why? Is this what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, he's getting pressure and no one's open. So there was a point in the game, the Eagles game last week where I was watching him play and I'm like, he is literally going to just take the game over and just run through people.
But that's why I bring up Worthy and Rice and what have you, because with Worthy, with Rice, with Travis Kelce, you haven't had these cats, or Hollywood Brown, let me not forget him. You haven't had these cats, even though they've been on a squad together since 2024. They haven't played one game together yet because there's always been an injury.
And I'm with you, but this is the Chiefs.
Okay.
So, like, if we're asking the question, do you have trepidation or concern? Can they get back on track for what? Are we talking getting back on track to getting back into the division race or being a playoff contending football team or winning a Super Bowl?
Let me go to RC with this one. I can't believe I'm asking this question, but is KC possibly on upset alert against the Giants this week?
Absolutely.
Upset alert against the Giants?
Absolutely.
Wow.
The Kansas City Chiefs aren't the Kansas City Chiefs that we used to know. And while I think they can fix some of their problems, you just listen to Dan tell you that they have issues blocking.
Yeah.
This is a tough team to block.
Yeah.
This is the team that could put pressure on the quarterback, especially when you get him in sub package. And now Abdul Carter, Kayvon Thibodeau, Sexy Dexy, and Brian Burns are on the front line. And where they struggle and where we watched them struggle against Dallas was covering on the back end. You ain't got guys to cover.
Yeah.
And so I do believe that this team can cause them trouble, and especially with the way Spags has now have to bring pressure. And I've seen him play more zero in the first 2 weeks of this season than we've seen in the last 3 years.